when billionaire Anthony Vance was physically removed from a luxury restaurant in front of his crying grandchildren, everyone expected revenge. The owner had publicly humiliated him, security had dragged him to the sidewalk, and he had every resource to destroy her. But what he did in the next 48 hours didn't just shock the owner, it shocked Wall Street, social media, and everyone who heard this story. If you're already hooked, smash that like button right now so more people can see this incredible story. And subscribe, because what I reveal at the end about why he responded this way will absolutely blow your mind. In a world where power means crushing your enemies, Anthony did something nobody saw coming. Let's get into it. The story begins on a special evening at Fauna Kitchen. Anthony Vance pulled his silver Mercedes into the valet circle of Fauna Kitchen, the elegant Fifth Avenue restaurant his grandson had been anticipating for weeks. Golden light glowed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting reflections on puddles from the afternoon rain. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, and it was already 7:30 p.m. The heavy glass door opened. The scent of fresh rosemary and roasted duck filled the air. Piano music drifted softly. 12 tables were occupied with well-dressed diners. A young waitress with dark hair and a sleek bun looked up and smiled. "Good evening. Welcome to Fauna Kitchen," she said warmly. Her name tag read, "Catherine." "We have a reservation. It's my birthday," Anthony's grandson announced proudly, his red polo shirt bright against the elegant blue walls. Catherine's smile widened. "Happy birthday! Right this way to our best table." She gathered menus and led them to the window. "Can I start you with sparkling water?" "That would be lovely," Anthony's wife Sarah said as they settled in. Anthony helped his youngest grandson into his chair, noticing the menu special, braised short ribs. His grandmother Claudia used to make those on special occasions. The memory made him smile. As Catherine headed toward the kitchen, a woman in a navy blazer over chef's whites emerged. Her name tag read, "Carolina Larson, owner." Her eyes swept the room and froze on Anthony's table. "Catherine," she called sharply, "come here, now." The two women whispered urgently near the bar. Catherine's eyes widened, glancing back at Anthony. Carolina's face flushed red. Conversations quieted. Even the piano faltered. Carolina straightened her blazer and walked directly to Anthony's table, two security guards positioning themselves nearby. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice tight, "I can't serve you here." Anthony looked up at Carolina, confusion crossing his face. His wife Sarah set down her menu. The grandsons went quiet, sensing something wrong. "I'm sorry," Anthony said. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Vance." Carolina's voice carried across the now silent restaurant. Every diner had stopped eating, turned to watch. "I know what people like you do, how you make your billions while families like mine lose everything." Sarah's hand found Anthony's arm. The youngest grandson's lip trembled. "My parents built a business from nothing, 30 years of their lives. Then investors like you swept in, bought them out, gutted everything, and threw them away like garbage." Her hands clenched at her sides. "They lost their home, their retirement, everything." She nodded to the security guards. "Please escort this family out." The entire restaurant seemed frozen in shock. A woman at a nearby table gasped. A man pulled out his phone, already recording. Anthony felt heat rising in his face. Not embarrassment, rage, pure white-hot fury at being humiliated in front of his family on his grandson's birthday. He could feel the weight of every powerful connection he had. Every lawyer, every business associate. One phone call could end this restaurant. 2 calls could have inspectors crawling over every permit. 3 calls could destroy her name across every news network in the country. The power was his, and for one burning moment, he wanted to use it. Listen, you need to subscribe right now, because at the end of this video, I'm revealing a hidden connection that nobody in that restaurant knew about. There's a profound reason Anthony responded this way, and when I show you the secret family connection behind it, your mind will be blown. Every graceful word, every calm response was rooted in something deeper. Subscribe now and stay till the end. Trust me, this revelation will give you chills. But then he heard his grandmother Claudia's voice in his mind, the woman who'd raised him alone, working 3 jobs, teaching him that wealth was a responsibility, not a weapon. When someone hurts you, you choose who you become in that moment. You can make them suffer, or you can be bigger than the pain. Anthony took a slow breath. He looked at Carolina, really looked at her. Past the anger, he saw pain, deep, unhealed wounds from watching her parents destroyed. She wasn't seeing him. She was seeing whoever had hurt her family. He stood slowly, with quiet dignity. I understand. I'm truly sorry for whatever happened to your parents. I hope you find peace with that pain. Carolina seemed thrown. She'd expected threats, anger, the brutal use of power. This grace she didn't know how to process. Come on, Anthony said gently to his family. Sarah gathered her purse, tears in her eyes. The boys slid from their seats, the birthday boy clutching his crumpled card. One of the security guards stepped forward and took Anthony's arm firmly, pulling him toward the exit. The other guard moved to flank his other side. Every eye in the restaurant watched them physically remove him, his wife and grandsons following behind. The grandson in the red polo wiped his eyes. Outside on the sidewalk, Anthony knelt beside his youngest grandson. I'm so sorry, buddy. This wasn't about you. Why did she hate you? The boy asked, his voice small. She doesn't hate me. She's hurting. Sometimes pain makes people see enemies where there aren't any. The valet brought the Mercedes. Anthony helped his family in. Everyone is quiet now. But before getting in himself, he looked back through those windows. Carolina stood in her restaurant, defending her choice. Catherine stood near the bar, staring at the empty table. Something shifted in Anthony's chest. Not anger, opportunity. Whatever had just happened, the restaurant itself, what he'd seen in those brief minutes, deserved a chance. He settled into the driver's seat. Sarah was calling other restaurants. The boys sat subdued in back. Anthony pulled out his phone and called. Marcus, remember that restaurant fund we discussed? I found our next investment. It's called Fauna Kitchen. He looked back at the glowing restaurant. I'll send details tonight. Sarah glanced over. What was that about? Anthony pulled away from the curb, a slight smile on his face. Just planting a seed. Tomorrow everything will change. Carolina just didn't know it yet. Catherine stood frozen by the host's stand, her notepad still clutched against her chest. The restaurant had slowly come back to life after the Vance family left. Diners returned to their meals, though hushed conversations continued. She could feel their eyes on her, on Carolina, on the empty table by the window where a birthday celebration should have happened. Her hands trembled slightly. She had watched that little boy's face crumble, seen the tears he tried to hide. It didn't feel right. None of it felt right. But Carolina was her boss, and jobs like this were hard to find in New York, especially jobs that paid enough to help with Grandma Eliza's medical bills. Carolina emerged from the kitchen, her face still flushed but set with determination. She gathered the staff near the bar once the dinner rush finally ended. I know what some of you are thinking, she said, her voice firm. But you don't understand what people like him do. My parents worked 30 years building their business. 30 years. Then investors came in with their money and their lawyers and their promises. 6 months later, my parents had nothing. My father had a heart attack from the stress. My mother lost everything she'd worked for. Her hands gripped the edge of the bar. I will not serve people who destroy families for profit. I will not pretend that wealth makes someone worthy of respect. This is my restaurant, and I get to decide who sits at these tables." The other staff members nodded, some more enthusiastically than others. Catherine said nothing, but her stomach twisted. She kept seeing that grandfather kneeling on the wet sidewalk, comforting his crying grandson. That didn't look like a man who destroyed families. That looked like a man who loved him, but she couldn't say that. Not here, not now. So she finished her closing duties in silence, collected her tips, and headed home to the small apartment she shared with her grandmother. Eliza was waiting up, as she always did. The television played softly in the background, but her grandmother's sharp eyes were on Catherine the moment she walked through the door. "You look troubled, baby," Eliza said, setting down her knitting. "What happened tonight?" Catherine sat beside her on the worn couch and told her everything. About the Vance family arriving for a birthday dinner, about Carolina's refusal to serve them, about the security guards and the public humiliation, about the little boy in the red polo shirt wiping his eyes as they left. "Carolina says he's like the people who destroyed her parents' business," Catherine finished. "She says wealthy people don't deserve our service." Eliza was quiet for a long moment, her weathered hands folded in her lap. Finally she spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "Your boss has been hurt, and hurt people sometimes hurt others. But sweetheart, wealth doesn't make a person good or bad any more than poverty does. I've known rich folks with hearts of gold and poor folks mean as snakes. Character isn't about what's in your bank account, it's about what's in your heart." She reached over and took Catherine's hand. "You saw that man comfort his grandson. You saw him respond with grace when he could have responded with power. That tells you something about his character, doesn't it?" Catherine nodded slowly, the knot in her stomach tightening. "But what if he retaliates? What if he destroys the restaurant? Carolina gave him every reason to hurt us." Eliza's expression grew thoughtful. "I suppose we'll find out what kind of man he really is, won't we? Tomorrow will show us the truth." Catherine arrived at Fauna Kitchen the next morning to find something she'd never seen before. A crowd. At least 30 people stood outside the restaurant, checking their phones, talking excitedly among themselves. A white van with Wall Street News printed on the side was parked at the curb. A reporter with perfectly styled hair stood near the entrance, speaking into a camera. Catherine's heart started pounding. This was it. Anthony Vance had made his move. He'd sent the media to destroy them. She pushed through the crowd, fumbling with her keys to unlock the front door. "Excuse me, do you work here?" A woman in a business suit called out. "Is it true Anthony Vance ate here?" Catherine didn't answer. She slipped inside and locked the door behind her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Marianne, the other waitress. "Have you seen social media? Check Anthony Vance's account. OMG." Catherine pulled up her phone with shaking hands and searched for Anthony Vance's name. His latest post was from 2 hours ago. It already had over 50,000 likes. The photo showed Fauna Kitchen's elegant blue exterior, the windows glowing warmly in the evening light. Catherine read the caption, her breath catching in her throat. "Had an unexpected experience at Fauna Kitchen on 5th Avenue last night. While the owner and I have different views, I respect her right to serve who she chooses. What I witnessed in my brief time there was exceptional attention to detail, passionate staff, and a commitment to quality that's rare these days. The menu looked outstanding. If you're in New York, support this local business. Strong principles and great food deserve our respect, even when we disagree. Hold up. Pause right here. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done in Anthony's position? Seriously, I want to know. Comment below right now." Catherine read it 3 times, unable to process what she was seeing. He wasn't attacking them. He wasn't calling for boycotts or lawsuits. He was recommending the restaurant, praising it. after Carolina had publicly humiliated him, thrown him out in front of his family, ruined his grandson's birthday. Why would he do this? Her phone rang. Carolina. Have you seen it? Her boss asked, her voice strange and tight. The Post, the crowds. I don't understand what's happening. I'm at the restaurant, Catherine said. There are maybe 30 people outside and a news van. I'm 10 minutes away. Don't open it until I get there. When Carolina arrived, she looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, her hair pulled back hastily. Together they peered through the windows at the growing crowd. More people kept arriving. The reporter was now interviewing customers waiting outside. This doesn't make sense, Carolina kept saying. Why would he do this? It has to be some kind of trick, some way to make me look bad. But Catherine remembered what her grandmother had said. Character shows in actions, not words. And this action spoke volumes. They opened the doors at 11. The crowd poured in, filling every table within minutes. The phone rang constantly with reservation requests. People wanted to eat at the restaurant Anthony Vance had praised, the restaurant that had kicked him out. By noon, they were completely booked for the next 2 weeks. Catherine worked in a daze, taking orders, delivering food, watching Carolina move through the kitchen like a woman in shock. Every customer mentioned the Post. If a billionaire recommends a place after they refuse to serve him, you know it must be incredible. Take a real class to respond like that. This is the kind of business we should support. Carolina's face grew paler with each comment. She pulled Catherine aside during a brief lull. I don't understand, she whispered. I humiliated him. I threw him out. Why isn't he destroying us? Catherine thought of the little boy asking why someone hated his grandfather. She thought of Anthony kneeling on the wet sidewalk, choosing gentleness over rage. Maybe, Catherine said softly, he's not the person you thought he was. 3 days after the Post went viral, a cream-colored envelope arrived in the morning mail. Catherine noticed it immediately. The address was handwritten in elegant script, flowing and careful. No return address, just Carolina's name and the restaurant. Something about it felt important. She set it aside on Carolina's desk in the small office behind the kitchen. The restaurant was still packed. Every table is full from open to close. The phone rang constantly. They'd had to hire 2 more servers just to keep up. Carolina moved through it all like a ghost, taking reservations, managing the kitchen, but with a strange hollowness in her eyes. The success felt wrong to her, Catherine could tell. It was built on something she couldn't understand, and that confusion was eating at her. That evening, after the last customer left and the staff had gone home, Catherine found Carolina sitting at a corner table. The cream-colored envelope lay open in front of her. A single sheet of matching stationery rested in her hands. Carolina's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Catherine approached quietly, unsure whether to intrude. Carolina looked up, her face wet with tears. He wrote to me. Anthony Vance wrote me a letter. She held it out with trembling hands. Catherine took it, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting. Dear Ms. Larson, it began, I wanted to write to you personally, away from social media and public attention. First, I want you to know I hold no anger toward you for what happened. You were protecting something precious to you, and I respect that fiercely. If you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. People who believe grace is more powerful than revenge. Hit that subscribe button because the next story shows this same pattern transforming entire communities, and you do not want to miss it. Subscribe now. The letter continued. My grandmother Claudia raised me alone after my parents died. She worked 3 jobs, cleaned offices at night, took in laundry, did whatever she had to do to keep us fed. She never had money, but she had something more valuable. Wisdom. She used to tell me, Anthony, when someone hurts you, You get to choose. You can hurt them back and feel powerful for a moment, or you can respond with healing and be powerful forever. She taught me that wealth is a responsibility, not a weapon. That's how you treat people who can do nothing for you, reveals who you really are. Catherine's throat tightened as she read on. I heard the pain in your words about your parents. What investors did to them, how they lost everything they'd built. That kind of hurt doesn't heal quickly. Maybe it never fully heals. But I hope you know that not everyone with money uses it to harm. Some of us remember where we came from. Some of us are trying to build bridges instead of walls, trying to use wealth to help families like yours instead of destroying them. The letter ended simply. Your restaurant is special. Your dedication to quality, to your staff, to your community, it shows in everything. I hope you'll accept my genuine respect, even if we disagree on other things. With admiration, Anthony Vance. Catherine looked up at Carolina, who had buried her face in her hands. I was so sure, Carolina whispered through her tears. I was so certain I knew what kind of person he was. I saw my parents' pain and I put it on him. I didn't even give him a chance. She looked at Catherine with red, swollen eyes. What have I done? I humiliated a good man in front of his grandchildren on a child's birthday, and he responded with this. She gestured at the letter, her hand shaking. How do I fix this? How do I even begin to make this right? Catherine brought the letter home that night. She couldn't stop thinking about it, about the grandmother who'd raised Anthony with such wisdom. When she walked into the apartment, Eliza was in her usual spot on the couch, working on her knitting. Grandma, you won't believe what happened today, Catherine said, sitting down beside her. She told her about the letter, about Anthony's words, about his grandmother Claudia, who had worked 3 jobs and taught him to respond to hurt with healing. As she spoke the name, Eliza's hands went still on her knitting needles. Her eyes widened, focused somewhere far away. Claudia, she whispered. Did you say Claudia? Yes, his grandmother. Why? Eliza set down her knitting with trembling hands. What is her last name? Claudia what? Catherine pulled out her phone and searched quickly. Vance. Claudia Vance. She raised Anthony alone after his parents died, worked multiple jobs, lived in poverty but taught him about kindness and character. Eliza's hand went to her mouth. Tears sprang to her eyes. Oh, my Lord, wait here, baby, just wait. She stood slowly, using the arm of the couch for support, and disappeared into her bedroom. Catherine heard drawers opening, the sound of something being moved. When Eliza returned, she carried an old photo album, its blue leather cover faded and worn at the edges. Eliza sat back down and opened the album with reverent care. She turned pages slowly until she found what she was looking for. There, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That's Claudia. Catherine leaned in to look. The photograph showed 2 young girls, maybe 13 or 14 years old, sitting on the steps of a rundown porch. They had their arms around each other, bright smiles despite the worn clothes and bare feet. One girl was clearly a young Eliza. The other had wild, curly hair and fierce, intelligent eyes. This is Claudia Vance, Catherine breathed. This is Anthony's grandmother. We grew up together, Eliza said, touching the photo gently. Best friends from the time we could walk. Both our families were dirt poor, but we had each other. Claudia was the bravest person I ever knew. Eliza turned more pages, each one revealing another memory. See this one. Claudia found a stray dog someone had been beating. She marched right up to those boys, twice her size, and told them if they ever touched that dog again, she'd make them sorry. They ran off. That's who she was. Another photo. And here, this was the day she gave me half her lunch, because my mama couldn't afford to pack me one. She did that for weeks until my daddy found work again. Eliza's eyes were wet now, her voice soft with remembrance. She always said the same thing. We don't have money, Liza, but we have something better. We have character, and nobody can take that from us. Catherine felt goosebumps rise on her arms. That's exactly what Anthony wrote in his letter, about character being more important than wealth. Because that's what she taught him, Eliza said, wiping her eyes. Just like she taught me. Claudia believed you judged people by how they treated others, especially those who couldn't do anything for them. She believed in responding to hate with love, to hurt with healing. She looked at Catherine with absolute certainty. If Anthony Vance grew up with Claudia's values, then your boss was wrong about him, dead wrong. Catherine arrived at work the next morning with the photo album tucked carefully under her arm. She found Carolina in the office, staring at Anthony's letter for what must have been the 100th time. I need to show you something, Catherine said. She opened the album to the page with the two young girls on the porch steps. That's my grandmother Eliza on the left, and that's Claudia Vance on the right, Anthony's grandmother. They grew up together. Best friends. Carolina's hand flew to her mouth. She looked from the photo to the letter and back again. They knew each other. More than that, Grandma says Claudia taught her the same lessons Anthony wrote about in his letter, about character and kindness, about responding to hurt with healing. Catherine turned more pages, showing Carolina the images of two poor girls who had nothing but gave everything they had to each other and others around them. Anthony learned his values from the same woman who taught my grandmother. That's why he responded the way he did. It's who he is. Carolina sat in silence for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she pulled out a sheet of the restaurant's letterhead and began to write. Her hand shook at first, then steadied as the words flowed. She wrote about her shame, her regret, her realization that she had judged him unfairly. She wrote about learning that his grandmother and Catherine's grandmother were childhood friends, about the values they shared, about the bridge between them she had never known existed. She wrote about wanting to make things right, to apologize properly, to offer him the meal and the respect she should have given from the beginning. Would you and your family honor me with a private dinner at Fauna Kitchen? She wrote. No cameras, no crowds, just a chance to apologize face to face and to let you meet Eliza, your grandmother's dearest friend. She has stories about Claudia I think you would treasure. Catherine read the letter and nodded. It's perfect, but how do we get it to him? They both thought of the Wall Street news van that had been parked outside. The reporter, Terrence Oliver, had been back several times, trying to interview Carolina about the viral story. He'll have contacts, Carolina said, ways to reach someone like Anthony Vance. They found Terrence at a coffee shop down the street. Carolina handed him the sealed envelope. I need you to deliver this personally, not as a story, as a favor, please. Something in her face must have moved him because he nodded. I'll make sure he gets it. 2 days passed in anxious silence. Catherine watched Carolina jump every time the phone rang. Then, on the third morning, a text message arrived on the restaurant's business line. Ms. Larson, I received your letter. I would be deeply honored to accept your invitation. Meeting Eliza would mean the world to me. My grandmother spoke of her friend Liza until her last days. Friday evening at 7, and please call me Anthony. Carolina read the message 3 times, her hand pressed to her chest. He said yes, she whispered. After everything I did, he said yes. Friday evening arrived with a mixture of anticipation and nerves. Carolina had closed the restaurant to the public, setting a single table by the window with the finest linens and her best dishes. She'd spent the entire day preparing a special menu, her hands steady with purpose for the first time in weeks. When Anthony arrived at 7, he came alone. No family this time, no celebration. just a man in that same blue suit, carrying a small bakery box tied with string. Carolina met him at the door, and for a moment neither spoke. Then she said simply, "Thank you for coming." He nodded. "Thank you for the courage to ask." Catherine guided him to the table where Eliza already sat, the photo album open in front of her. The moment Anthony saw her, his steps faltered. Eliza looked up, and her eyes filled with tears. "You have her eyes," she said softly. "Claudia's eyes, that same fierce kindness." Anthony moved to her side and knelt beside her chair, taking her weathered hands in his. "She spoke of you," he said, his voice breaking, "all the way to the end. Her friend Liza. I never knew how to find you." Eliza touched his cheek gently. "She raised you right, boy. I can see that clear as day." They sat together as Eliza turned the pages of the album, telling stories that brought Claudia back to life. She told him about the time Claudia stood up to boys twice her size to protect a beaten dog, about how she always shared what little she had, even when she had almost nothing, about her belief that character mattered more than circumstances, that wealth was what you did with it, not what it did to you. Anthony listened with tears streaming down his face, seeing his grandmother young and fierce and full of hope before life had worn her down with struggle. "She never lost that," he said. "Even at the end, even after everything she'd been through, she still believed in kindness. She still believed people were worth saving." Carolina had been standing back, watching, but now she stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, Anthony, I need to say something." He turned to her, and she felt the full weight of what she'd done. "I judged you without knowing you. I took my pain and my parents' pain and I put it on you. I humiliated you in front of your family. I ruined your grandson's birthday, and you responded with grace I didn't deserve." Her voice broke. "I'm so deeply sorry." Anthony stood and faced her. "Your pain was real. What happened to your parents was real. You weren't wrong to feel it." "But I was wrong to assume you were like the people who hurt them," Carolina said. "Wrong to think wealth automatically makes someone cruel." Anthony's expression grew thoughtful. "I've spent my whole adult life trying to be different from the people who use money as a weapon. I built my wealth, yes, but I've tried to remember Claudia's lessons, that with privilege comes responsibility, that the measure of success isn't what you accumulate, but what you give back." They talked late into the evening, discovering they wanted the same things. Both wanted to help struggling families. Both believed in supporting communities, in creating opportunities, in treating people with dignity, regardless of their bank accounts. The dinner Eliza had predicted would reveal the truth had done exactly that. It revealed that connection runs deeper than wealth or politics, that humanity, at its core, is about how we treat each other when it costs us something to be kind. After the meal, after the stories and tears, Anthony asked Carolina and Catherine to stay for a moment. Eliza had excused herself to rest in the office, tired but happy. The three of them sat at the table, and Anthony pulled out his phone. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "That night, when I left here, I made a phone call from my car. I called my friend Marcus, who runs a community revitalization fund. I nominated Fauna Kitchen." Carolina's eyes widened. "You what?" "The phone call was about you," Anthony said gently. "Before I even knew about the viral post, before any of this happened, I saw something here. Quality, dedication, a business worth saving." He set his phone down. "Marcus contacted me 2 days ago. The fund wants to invest in Fauna Kitchen. Full renovation, modern equipment, expanded staff benefits. Everything you need to not just survive, but thrive." Carolina stood abruptly, shaking her head. No, I can't accept that." Her voice was firm but painful. "You're doing this because you feel sorry for me, because I apologized. But I don't deserve your charity, Anthony, not after what I did to you. Anthony remained seated, calm. This isn't charity. And it's not because you apologized. I made that call 10 minutes after you threw me out, remember? When I was still angry and hurt and sitting in my car with my crying grandson. He met her eyes. I made that call because even in those 5 minutes before you recognized me, I could see what you'd built here, the quality of your ingredients, the way your staff looked at you with respect, not fear. They care in every detail. That's worth investing in, Carolina. Your character is worth investing in. But I misjudged you so badly, Carolina whispered, tears starting again. I was cruel. You were hurt, Anthony corrected. There's a difference. And you had the courage to face it, to change, to reach out. That takes more strength than most people have. Catherine reached over and took Carolina's hand. Grandma would say this is grace. Carolina, not getting what you deserve, but getting what you need anyway. That's what Claudia taught Anthony, to give people grace. Carolina looked at the table, at the empty plates from the meal she'd prepared, at the photo album still open to images of 2 young girls who'd had nothing but gave everything. If I accept this, she said slowly, things change. Not just the restaurant. Me. I can't go back to judging people by their bank accounts. I can't refuse service based on assumptions. She looked up at Anthony. We serve everyone, no matter who they are, what they believe, how much money they have. Everyone gets treated with dignity. That's my new policy. Anthony smiled, standing to shake her hand. I think Claudia would approve of that. The investment papers arrived the following week. Carolina signed them with steady hands. Her staff gathered around her, and in the office, hanging on the wall where she could see it every day, she placed the photo of young Claudia and Eliza, a reminder that character, not wealth, defines who we are. 6 months passed, and the Fauna kitchen looked like a different place. The renovation had transformed it while keeping its soul. The elegant blue walls remained, but now the kitchen gleamed with modern equipment, visible through new glass panels. The dining room had expanded into the space next door, doubling the seating, but the biggest change wasn't in the building, it was in the people. Catherine now wore a name tag that read General Manager instead of waitress. The promotion came with a salary that covered Eliza's medical expenses comfortably, with enough left over for Catherine to finally enroll in the business courses she'd been putting off for years. Health insurance for all employees meant the staff no longer worked in fear of one illness, destroying everything they'd built. The kitchen had hired 3 new cooks, the floor had 4 new servers, and everyone received training in both service excellence and the restaurant's new core value that hung in the back office. We serve everyone with dignity. Anthony had become a regular fixture at Fauna Kitchen. Every Friday evening, he arrived for dinner, sometimes alone, sometimes with business associates, and once a month with his whole family. The first time his grandsons returned, Carolina had personally brought out a birthday cake for the boy in the red polo shirt. 6 months late, but received with a smile that made everyone's eyes water. The relationship between Anthony and Carolina had evolved into genuine friendship. They met regularly to discuss not just the restaurant, but other struggling businesses in New York. Through Anthony's connections and Carolina's knowledge of the community, they'd helped revitalize 5 other local establishments. A bakery that had been days from closing, a bookstore that couldn't compete with online retailers, a family-owned hardware store that needed modern inventory systems. Each one received not just money, but mentorship, strategic planning, and the kind of support that helped them become sustainable. The impact rippled through the community in ways no one had expected. The story of what had happened at Fauna Kitchen how a billionaire had responded to rejection with kindness, and how a business owner had found the courage to change, became a local legend. People started talking differently about wealth and poverty, about judging others, about the possibility of connection across divides that seemed impossible to bridge. The Wall Street news story that Terrence Oliver finally wrote wasn't about conflict or drama. It was about transformation, about two people who chose grace over grudges and changed their entire community in the process. On a quiet Tuesday evening, after the dinner rush had ended, Catherine found Carolina and Anthony sitting at that same window table where everything had begun. Eliza sat with them, the photo album open between them as always. They were laughing about something Claudia had done as a girl, some act of fierce kindness that had shaped both their lives decades later. Catherine stood back and watched, understanding finally what her grandmother had tried to teach her, that dignity costs nothing but changes everything, that responding to hurt with healing instead of more hurt doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful in ways that money never could, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act in a divided world is simply choosing to see the humanity in everyone, especially those we think we have every reason to hate. Click the video on your right to see 3 more incredible stories where people chose kindness over revenge and changed everything. You'll see the patterns, the transformations, and the exact moments when compassion wins. These stories will restore your faith in humanity. Click now.